You've been growing, reading, journaling, maybe meditating. And then one day, without warning, you stopped. The progress just froze. You can feel the edge of where you are, and you keep bumping into it like a bird hitting glass. The strangest part is you can see exactly where you want to be. You just can't seem to get there. This invisible barrier has a shape, and once you understand its geometry, you'll recognize it in every stalled ambition you've ever had. Think about the last time you tried to level up in some area of your life. Maybe you wanted to charge more for your work, speak up in meetings, or set a boundary with someone who keeps crossing it. You knew the action. You'd rehearsed it. You could explain it to someone else with perfect clarity. And yet, when the moment arrived, something pulled you back. A gravitational force with no visible source. That force has two components, and they work together like the walls and ceiling of a room you built around yourself years ago. The first component is the one everyone talks about, the comfort zone, your behavioral thermostat. It regulates how much novelty, risk, and discomfort you'll tolerate before your body starts screaming at you to retreat. You felt it. The racing heart before a difficult conversation. The sudden urge to check your phone instead of writing the email. The way your brain manufactures 12 reasonable excuses to stay home instead of going to the networking event. That thermostat is calibrated by repetition. Whatever you do most often becomes normal, and your entire system fights to maintain normal. But the comfort zone only explains the horizontal boundary, the walls of the room. What about the ceiling? The ceiling is your self-concept. The story you carry about who you are, what kind of person you are, what someone like you does and doesn't do. This one is sneakier because it doesn't feel like a limitation. It feels like identity. It feels like truth. Here's how the two interact. Your comfort zone says, that action feels scary. Your self-concept says, that action isn't me. Scary. You can push through. You've done hard things before. But isn't me? That stops people cold. For years. Sometimes permanently. A researcher at the University of British Columbia ran a study where participants were given the chance to earn significantly more money by adopting a negotiation style that conflicted with how they described themselves. Cooperative people were asked to be aggressive. Assertive people were asked to be passive. The participants who performed worst weren't the ones facing the hardest task. They were the ones whose task clashed most sharply with their self-description. Their skills were identical. The variable that predicted failure was identity friction. Your brain treats self-concept the way an immune system treats a virus. Anything that contradicts the existing identity gets flagged, attacked, and expelled. You've experienced this as the strange discomfort of receiving a compliment you don't believe. Someone says, "You're a natural leader," and instead of absorbing it, something inside you flinches, deflects, changes the subject. The compliment bounced off the ceiling. So the plateau isn't a lack of knowledge. You already know what to do. You've read the books, you've watched the videos. The plateau is a geometry problem. You're standing in a room where the walls are your habits and the ceiling is your story, and you keep redecorating the interior instead of knocking out a wall. This explains a pattern that confuses a lot of people. They invest heavily in personal development, courses, coaches, retreats, and experience a burst of growth followed by a slow, almost invisible regression back to baseline. The comfort zone expanded temporarily, the self-concept didn't budge. And since identity is the deeper structure, it quietly dragged everything else back into alignment. Think of it like stretching a rubber band. You can pull it far from its resting state, you can hold it there with effort, but the moment you release attention, it snaps back. The resting length of that band is your self-concept. Until you change the band itself, every stretch is temporary. So what actually changes the band? The evidence points to something counterintuitive. Insight doesn't do it. Understanding your patterns, analyzing your childhood, mapping your triggers, all useful, all insufficient. The self-concept updates through action that contradicts it, performed repeatedly, in contexts where the old identity can't explain away the new behavior. A therapist at Stanford documented this with socially anxious patients. Traditional talk therapy helped them understand why they were anxious. Cognitive restructuring helped them challenge anxious thoughts. But the patients who actually shifted their self-concept were the ones who engaged in behavioral experiments, real-world actions that directly contradicted the statement, "I am a socially anxious person," attending a party. initiating a conversation with a stranger, holding eye contact for an uncomfortable duration. Each action deposited a tiny piece of counter-evidence against the existing identity. Over weeks, the evidence accumulated until the old story couldn't hold. The critical detail most people miss: the action has to be visible to yourself. Internal work, affirmations, visualization, journaling, operates below the threshold of self-concept change because your brain classifies it as thinking, and thinking doesn't update identity. Doing does. You can tell yourself, "I am confident," 10,000 times. Your self-concept watches what you do, and it believes that. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable part of this whole mechanism. The plateau is functional. It protects something. Your current self-concept, limiting as it might be, serves a purpose. It keeps your world predictable. It tells you which situations to avoid, which people to approach, which risks to take. Dissolving it means a period where you genuinely don't know who you are. And that ambiguity, that identity fog, is what most growth frameworks fail to mention. You felt a version of this, maybe after a breakup, a job loss, or a move to a new city. That disorienting stretch where your old routines don't apply and your old story doesn't quite fit the new context. You were between identities. The old self-concept had cracked, but the new one hadn't solidified yet. That liminal space is where real growth happens. And almost everyone runs from it. The running looks productive, you sign up for another course. You start a new journal, you download a meditation app, you reorganize your bookshelf by color. All motion, zero identity disruption. The comfort zone gets slightly stretched. The ceiling stays exactly where it was. Breaking through the ceiling requires a specific kind of action. It has to be small enough to actually do, but contradictory enough to register as evidence against the old story. If you see yourself as someone who doesn't speak up, you don't need to deliver a keynote. You need to say one honest sentence in a meeting where you'd normally stay quiet. Then do it again on Thursday, then again the following week. Each repetition is a vote, and your self-concept counts votes. The change follows a pattern that looks like nothing, then everything. For weeks, maybe months, the actions feel forced, performative, like you're pretending to be someone else. This is the phase where most people quit because the discomfort feels like proof they're on the wrong path. Actually, the discomfort is proof of exactly the opposite. The immune system is activated because the new behavior is registering as a genuine threat to the existing identity. If it felt easy, it wouldn't be touching the ceiling. Then comes a moment, and people describe this with eerie consistency, where the action stops feeling like performance and starts feeling like preference. You speak up in the meeting and afterward realize you didn't have to talk yourself into it. The behavior migrated from effortful to automatic. The self-concept updated. That migration has a timeline. Behavioral research suggests it takes somewhere between 2 and 8 months of consistent contradictory action before identity-level change consolidates. The variance depends on how central the trait is to your existing self-concept. Peripheral changes? I'm someone who flosses now. Consolidate quickly. Core identity shifts? I'm someone who deserves success. Take longer because the immune response is fiercer. And here's the part that makes this genuinely difficult. You can't think your way to the new identity, but you can think your way out of it. One strong ruminative episode, one weekend of spiraling back into the old narrative, can undo weeks of behavioral evidence. The self-concept is biased toward its existing state. It weighs confirming evidence more heavily than contradicting evidence, so 10 instances of speaking up can be neutralized by one internal monologue about how you're fundamentally a quiet person. The people who break through the plateau treat identity like a construction project, show up to the site every day, lay the bricks whether you feel like it or not. Some days the weather is bad and nothing visible gets built. You show up anyway, because the building doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about the bricks, that room you've been living in, the one with the walls of habit and the ceiling of story, has a feature you may have overlooked. You built it. Every wall, every surface, every square inch of that ceiling was installed by repeated action and repeated narrative, most of it before you were old enough to choose consciously. The same mechanism that built it can rebuild it, brick by brick, vote by vote, until one morning you reach for the ceiling and your hand passes through.